The Russian parliament passed a proposal this evening. It asked Russian President Vladimir Putin to recognize Donbas as a republic. In other words, a territory governed by an elected representative. And this is a clear provocation. It is a threat of war. And I will tell you why. Donbas will determine what happens next in this crisis. This is the region we are talking about. It's a small region in eastern Ukraine. Here's where it's located on the map. Now, like you can see, Donbas adjoins the Russian border. It has been at war for years. 8 years to be precise. Donbas consists of two regions, Donetsk and Luhansk. Both are heavily industrialized. A war broke out in 2014 here. It pit Ukrainian forces against pro-Russian separatists. Several rounds of talks were held. They resulted in what's called the Minsk Agreements. Russia, Ukraine, France and Germany signed this Minsk Agreement in 2014 and then a second part of it in 2015. The agreements were meant to stop the war. Russia agreed to withdraw troops and weapons from Ukraine. Kiev agreed to hold elections in Donbas and grant the region a special status. Neither side kept its word. So 8 years on, Donbas stands devastated. 14,000 people have died in the past 8 years, 14,000. Families have been displaced. The area's economy has been destroyed. Today, pro-Russian separatists control 1/3 of Donbas. Ukraine considers this region as occupied by Russia. Moscow has been pushing for its autonomy. Ukraine wants to keep this region. There's been talk of granting Donbas a self-governing status. Now, 60% of Ukrainians are against it, according to a poll. A special status basically means elections, and elections mean pro-Russian parties will come to power here, and that would mean Russian influence on Ukraine's domestic and foreign policy. Ukraine says it may grant Donbas a special status, but for that, there must be a ceasefire first and a withdrawal of Russian troops and weaponry. Russia says all of this will happen only if Donbas is allowed to hold elections first. And this back and forth has been on for 8 years. It continues to this day. So that's the history. Right now, Russia is trying to change the status quo unilaterally. The passing of a proposal on Donbas is an example of that. Russia wants to recognize rebel leaders of Donbas and give them the status of legitimate rulers. What happens if Putin agrees to this proposal? What if he declares Donbas as a republic? There are 4 possible scenarios. Scenario number 1, Russia could invade Ukraine citing a threat to Donbas, and the groundwork for that is already being laid. A Russian news agency is headlining a possible threat to the region. Pro-Russian separatists are adding fuel to the fire. Listen to this.
The military leadership of the People's Militia of the Donetsk People's Republic observes preparations by the Ukrainian armed forces to unleash active combat operations in Donbas.
Recently, Ukraine was holding drills in Donbas. It was preparing to attack Donbas. Was it preparing, rather? It's highly unlikely. Scenario number 2, Russia could be using Donbas as a bargaining chip. It could promise reintegration of Donbas in exchange for Ukraine's NATO dreams. Scenario number 3, Russia could take these republics. It could take Donbas in exchange for de-escalation, basically redraw the map of Ukraine again. And scenario number 4, a full-fledged war could break out. If Putin declares the region a republic, it amounts to sounding the war bugle. What is the Russian president likely to do? Speaking earlier this evening, Vladimir Putin said Russia should do everything to resolve the problems of Donbas. Recognizing Donbas would mean claiming sovereignty over the entire Donetsk and Luhansk regions, including parts controlled by Ukraine. And that would be, like I've been saying, a serious provocation. How will Ukraine respond to it? What about the West? Well, one can only guess at this point. Basically, what happens in Donbas or what happens with regards to Donbas will determine what happens next. So this is a region you must watch very closely. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.